Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello and welcome to episode 895 with Eduardo Briceño. We brought Eduardo back because he has so much fantastic insight in the trenches, what it really takes to continue learning, growing, improving, getting better and better, and why many of us can actually stagnate. He illuminates a mystery called the performance paradox and gives some really actionable tips on how we can not get sucked into that, but rather continually get better and better and enjoy more fun, wins, meaning, and money, as we say here along the way. So you'll learn 1, how focusing on performance actually hurts results. 2, the 1 feedback method that always tells the truth. And 3, the 5 key elements that drive growth. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we reference here, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP895, and you'll find that there. Now, here's a bit about Eduardo. Eduardo Briceño is a global keynote speaker and facilitator who guides many of the world's leading companies in developing cultures of learning and high performance. Earlier in his career, he was the co-founder and CEO of Mindset Works, the first company to offer growth mindset development services. And previously, he was a venture capital investor with the Sprout Group. His TED Talk, How to Get Better at the Things You Care About, and his prior TEDx Talk, The Power of Belief, have been viewed more than 9 million times. He is a Pahara-Aspen Fellow, a member of the Aspen Institute's Global Leadership Network, and an inductee in the Happiness Hall of Fame. I'd also say that Eduardo really walks his talk. Both times I've interviewed him, he asked, "So do you have any feedback for me on how I could improve, get better?" And I just really love and respect and appreciate that question, to be frequently on the hunt for feedback to continue learning and growing and improving. Great stuff from Eduardo. Big thanks to Eduardo for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Storyworth. Whenever I'm thinking about meaningful Father's Day gifts, Storyworth leaps to mind. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your father for years to come. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I personally love the prompt so much that I have refreshed Storyworth's questions page many times looking for more. Storyworth makes the writing process super quick and easy. All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story, and then you get a quick copy of that. And after a year of this fun, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. Families love Storyworth so much, they've got 25,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot and have millions of stories preserved. So give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift they'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, you can save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/awesome. That's storyworth.com/awesome to save $10 on your first purchase. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. And now, here he is. Eduardo, welcome back to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
It's great to be here, Pete. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, I'm so excited to hear some of your insights and wisdom that you've captured in your book, The Performance Paradox, Turning the Power of Mindset into Action. But first, I want to hear, talking about growth mindsets, wow, is it in fact true that you did not have any prior public speaking experience before you did your TEDx talk?
That is true. And I would have never thought, I mean, becoming a public speaker, which is what I do now, it just didn't even cross my mind growing up or in my young adulthood. I had started an organization, Mindset Works, with Carol Dweck and Lisa Blackwell. And a board member encouraged me to go out and have people get to know me and know who I was. We were evangelizing growth mindset. And she thought that as part of that, I needed to kind of become a leader in the industry and people needed to know who I was. So I actually thought, hey, like, I don't have time. I have so much work to do. I agree with you. But when Carol Dweck was asked to do a TEDx talk, she couldn't do it. And so then we decided, and I thought that would be a good opportunity to put a lot of work into 10 minutes. I can do 10 minutes. I can work really hard to prepare a great script and deliver it. And so I worked really hard with Carol and with others. And I was so nervous during those 10 minutes. I, the whole time, looked at the back wall and the lights and not at people's eyes because I thought that I would just blank out if I tried to figure out what people were thinking. So that was my first public speaking experience, was a TEDx talk. And then that became pretty popular. It's being watched over 4 million times now.
Absolutely. Yes. Far more than most TEDx talks. It is featured prominently on the TED Proper website. And well, it's funny. I just rewatched that. And you didn't look that nervous.
Yeah, I don't know. That was surprising to me. I went onto stage and I thought, okay, I'm prepared. I've done everything I can. And now what's going to help my performance is to relax. I know I'm not going to look at people. So I had a plan and that helped me be relaxed. And I was more relaxed than I would have thought. And then a few years later, 4 years later, I did another TEDx talk that became a TED talk. And that also has been viewed over 4 million times. And that was the basis for the book that I wrote, The Performance Paradox.
Well, so tell us, what's the big idea in The Performance Paradox?
The performance paradox is the counterintuitive fact that if we fixate solely on performing, our performance suffers. So often we're really encouraging ourselves and others to just focus on executing, doing the best we know how, trying to minimize mistakes. And that hurts our performance. That is the counterintuitive fact. That is chapter 1, is the problem. And the rest of the book is about the solution, how to overcome that problem.
And could you elaborate on the pathway? How is it that doing the same thing and trying not to make mistakes makes our performance worse?
Yeah. So the best way to understand this is if we kind of step out of our everyday context and look at people who are fantastic at what they do in domains where performance can be objectively measured. So sports, chess, performing arts, incredible acrobats. If you think about how an acrobat, for example, what they do, when we see them perform, they do these incredible acrobatic things. They do them beautifully, and they rarely make mistakes. And we tend to kind of have this vague idea that the way they became so good is by spending a lot of hours doing that thing that we are seeing. But actually, the way they become so good is by doing something very different from what we're seeing. When they are behind curtains at the gym or at the studio, they are making a lot of mistakes. They're missing the timing a lot because they're focused on what they haven't mastered yet. They're focused on the next level of challenge, and the show is always evolving. And so it's the time they spend in what I call the learning zone, which is when they're focused on improvement, that allows them to build their skills and to be so excellent in the performance zone. Same thing in sports. If you're playing a championship final, you're having trouble with a move, you're going to avoid that move during the match. But after the match, you go to your coach, you say, Coach, I have to work on this move. That's a very different activity and area of attention than when we do during the match. And what often happens for a lot of us is that we spend most of our time, if not all of our time, in the performance zone, just trying to get things done as best as we can, trying to minimize mistakes. And that works okay when we're novices because we're so bad. We don't need great learning strategies to get better. But once we become proficient, we stagnate. We don't continue to improve. And we think that the reason is we can't improve. That's a fixed mindset. But the reason really is that we're not engaging in the learning zone.
That's a really great distinction because I think some folks would say, well, of course, I've seen myself get better the more I do a thing. That's sort of self-evident in my own experience. And I love what you had to say. There was like, well, yes, that works just fine when you are really clueless.
Yeah. And it is amazing that we do learn that by experience, right? If I want to start to play tennis, I could go into the court and just play tennis with a friend and I will get better. And so we learn by experience that that's the way to improve. But then we stagnate once we become proficient. And then we conclude that we can't get better. We develop a fixed mindset when we haven't developed the skills and the habits in order to continue to improve and become excellent. Like if you look at Olympic gold medalists, they're the best in the world, but they will then engage in deliberate practice, right? To go beyond what they can do to continue to get even better. They don't just play games and matches.
Well, Eduardo, in a way, this is really haunting as I think from a meta perspective of just podcasting. I think that was accurate for maybe, several hundred, 300, 600, some number of hundreds of episodes. I think I got better just by doing more episodes and talking to folks. And then I have had a little bit of a sense of stagnation here. And I thought, is it just in my head? And I've heard people say, it's like, oh, wow, you were pretty good when we started and now you're amazing. And it's like, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I have felt like, I don't think I'm actually getting better at this. And that just makes sense. Like, well, before just doing it more times was sufficient to help me get better. And now that is no longer sufficient to help me get better. And so to use your terminology, if I were to enter the learning zone as a podcaster, host, interviewer, what might be some activities I do other than just simply do one more episode?
Well, I have some ideas I can share, but you know a whole lot about learning. So tell me, what do you think you might do to get better?
Well, I think it'd be closely listening to some episodes and making some notes in terms of what might I have done differently. I think it could be closely observing some of the finest interviewers around, see what they're doing, ask for feedback and perspective from either coaches or masters of the craft or listeners. It's like, hey, Pete, I've heard you hundreds of times and I have some thoughts. But Pete at awesomeatyourjob.com, lay them on me. I'm listening. Thank you. So those are some things that leap to mind there.
Absolutely. Those are great ideas. And they are different than just doing episodes, right? And they don't take a lot of time. And so the great performers, whether athletes or others, they do watch their videos. Like Beyonce watches videos of her performances after she performs and identifies what to change and shares notes of that with her colleagues. Clear Choice Dental Systems, they do dental implants. They have video cameras in their consult rooms so that the people who work there, when they're interacting with patients, for the patients that agree to this, that agree to be recorded for this purpose, they can watch the videos afterwards and go to a particular part of the conversation that they were working on and watch themselves and kind of think about what they can do differently and how what they tried worked or didn't work. And one thing that they say that I love is that sometimes when we receive feedback, which feedback is amazing. Feedback, I think, is the most powerful learning zone strategy in the workplace. But sometimes, especially for some people, when we receive feedback, we might react defensively, right? And think this person doesn't know what they're talking about, or they didn't really see what I saw. But what they say is that video always tells the truth, right? So if you listen to your recording and reflect on it, it doesn't have to be the whole thing. It can be just how you started the recording or how you ended or a particular part of it. Then that's a fantastic way to think about, okay, like what can I do differently next time? And one key thing when we are going about our work is in order to improve, we have to change. Like we can't improve and not change. So if we do the same thing today than we did yesterday, we're not going to get better. So we have to always be thinking about what is something that I can try differently. And for that, we can, like you said, we can observe experts, whether they are other podcasters, or we can read books or listen to podcasts to get ideas and identify, okay, what can I try differently? And then feedback in whatever form, like you said, it's a fantastic, fantastic, powerful strategy.
Another fun thing about that, the notion of that distinction there is that when you're new, doing anything helps you get better, and then you have to get precise. It seems like that's analogous to what happens in physical training as well. It's like when you're out of shape, walking anywhere, lifting anything improves your fitness. But then at some point, that's just not going to cut it. Bringing the groceries from your trunk to the kitchen isn't going to do it. And we need to get sort of more precise with the deliberate practice and learning in terms of, I'm going to need to lift this level of weight this many times and this kind of emotion in order to get an adaptation, because the easy gains have already been grabbed.
Absolutely. And there's another benefit to that, which is that when we are kind of just doing and exploring an idea, an activity and tinkering with it, just kind of doing it, we can play with it. We can try it out. We can see if we would enjoy it. And that is really important, because it kind of doesn't make sense to engage in deliberate practice and put a lot of effort into improvement into something that we are not going to enjoy and that is not important to us. So early in our process, kind of trying an activity, playing with it, tinkering with it is a way to improve, but it's also a way to explore whether it's something we want to do and get better at.
So I already love this stuff in terms of, what are some fun ways I could spend some more time in the learning zone and what might I be doing while I'm there? I suppose fundamentally, in order for anyone to have any motivation whatsoever to spend some time in the learning zone, they have to believe that learning and growth is possible. And so you've spent much time sharing the wisdom of the growth versus fixed mindset. For folks who are not as familiar with that, could you give us like this super quick crash course?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who have heard of the term growth mindset, I ask you to think about what it means to you. What do you think it means? Because when we ask what it means, even for people who have kind of been tinkering with it for a long time, people often say things it's like it's working hard or it's persevering or even is having a positive attitude or is being open-minded. And a growth mindset is none of those things. A growth mindset is a perspective about the nature of human beings. Specifically, is the belief that people can change, that we can change and that other people can change, that our abilities or our qualities are malleable, that we can develop them. And the reason that's important is that lots of research has shown that when we believe that we can change and that others can change, then we do the things that are necessary in the learning zone in order to improve, if we know how the learning zone works, which is another key component. But if we don't believe that we can change, then we're never going to do anything to change. We won't change, and we will confirm our fixed mindset. Similarly, if we believe that somebody else can't change, we're not going to share any information with them that they can learn from. So they won't know to do anything. They won't change. And that will create a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And confirm our starting belief.
And so the opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset, to believe that rather than things being changeable and growable, that, hey, you're either good at this or you're bad at this. Like, I'm just not a math person, whatever. I'd love to get your perspective. Sometimes, if maybe I'm a little sleep deprived, maybe a little stressed, and I'm interacting with something that's tricky. I'm thinking about like assembling furniture and I get frustrated and I feel like I'm stupid or like I'm a loser. And I don't like feeling that way. And I know from all this stuff, like, oh, Pete, it sounds like you're engaging in fixed mindset type thinking, a type evaluation of this stuff. And I'd rather not. I guess I'm curious if we're generally on board, like, yeah, growth mindset, that's real. I generally believe that. And yet we find ourselves drifting into thought patterns that sound more fixed mindset-y. Any pro tips for how we can, install the growth mindset all the more deep down in our operating system so it's alive and well and kicking and dominating?
So the first thing is to acknowledge that we all experience a fixed mindset some of the time, just like you described. And a fixed mindset is part of being human. We see sometimes some abilities as fixed or some people as fixed, and that is normal. And the really important thing to do is to notice it like you are and saying, oh, I am thinking that I can get better at this right now. And we might react with an emotional response right away, but we can observe it, let it kind of put a little bit of distance, pause a little bit, and think about, can I get better at this, right? Or can I examine my mistake to learn from my mistake? Or what different strategy can I use? What learning zone strategy can I use to get better at this? And so pausing, noticing our fixed mindset, and thinking about what can I do in the learning zone in order to improve? If that's something that I want to do, it doesn't mean that we should try to get better at everything. It means that whatever we do want to get better at, we can figure out what strategies are effective for that and engage in those strategies.
So if I'm assembling furniture and it's not going well, I can choose to be like, this is not an area, an endeavor of activity or skill that I am going to choose to really invest big in and master. I can just let that go and that's fine. And at the same time, if it's like, if I feel, well, maybe this is a broader question for all sorts of learning activities. When you're in the midst of doing something that is hard and not going well, and you're screwing up and you're frustrated and you feel dumb, what should we do?
Well, say that you're in the situation you described, that you're trying to assemble furniture, you're getting frustrated, you said you're sleep deprived, you're tired. You can think about that maybe in the moment, maybe if you can, maybe pause, right? But at some point when we reflect, we can think about, first of all, what is most important to me? Why am I assembling furniture? Is that important to me? Is it that I want to have a beautiful home? Or is it that I want to kind of update my couch? And why am I trying to do that? Am I trying to foster a feeling of calm in my home? And how can I get better at that? So sometimes what happens is that we get frustrated with mid-level goals or low-level goals, like assembling furniture. That might or might not be important to you. But what we want to do, sometimes we can quit at those things if that's a better way to achieve a higher level goal, like, achieving calm or achieving an uncluttered space, if that's important to you. Or sometimes that might be the right way. It might be I can get better at assembling furniture and that's something that I want to do. It's going to make me feel good. But part of the answer might be, okay, I am sleep deprived. Should I be changing my sleeping habits? Should I be going to bed earlier? Should I approach my mornings differently? So what is leading to my challenge right now? And rather than only focusing on the immediate challenge, thinking about what's most important to me and what are different ways that I could get better at that most important goal.
Okay. So in so doing, you're making some learnings and improvements on a thing that's even more important and broader reaching.
Yeah. Sometimes people associate growth mindset with grit or being persistent, which there's definitely a close association, but it doesn't mean that we need to be gritty around everything we're doing. It means we want to be gritty and most growth minded about the goals that we most care about. And so we need to identify what are those goals. There's something in psychology called the hierarchy of goals, which is like a pyramid. And at the top is what we care most about. And at the bottom is our low level strategies around the things we do. And so to go up the pyramid, we ask why we care. And to go down the pyramid, we ask how. And we want to be most gritty and most growth minded about the highest level goals, because then our answer on how we get better at those things might be different than what we're currently attempting.
That's cool to get a broad perspective and not get too fixated on something that maybe doesn't even matter all that much. Okay. Well, when it comes to mistakes, you say these can really propel our growth, and you've categorized 4 kinds of mistakes. Can you lay these out for us?
Most of us have a sense that we can learn from mistakes. But first, most of us don't realize how important mistakes are. So when we are in our mid-20s, the way the neuroplasticity in our brain works changes. Before our 20s, our brain changes based on experience. We walk around the street, we observe things, and our brain is reconfiguring. In our 20s, the brain doesn't do that as much from then on, but the main way that we can drive our neuroplasticity and become smarter and more capable is actually by making mistakes. It's by when the brain makes a prediction and that prediction turns out to be wrong. That's the main way that we can proactively elicit our own neuroplasticity. That's how important mistakes are. But on the other hand, so mistakes are really important, but also mistakes lower performance, right? Great performances are performances where we don't make a lot of mistakes. Like right now, you and I are having a conversation. It's a conversation about learning, so I'll be comfortable making mistakes. But in general, we want to not say things that are not true and not make mistakes if we are performing for others, right? To try to add value to others. And so how do we reconcile that? The mistakes are valuable, but also they lower performance. And so I unpack 4 different kinds of mistakes. So that's what chapter 5 is about. And so the first, there's the stretch mistakes, which are the mistakes that we make when we are trying to do things we haven't mastered yet, when we are in our learning zone. And those are mistakes that are super valuable. We want to be doing a lot of those mistakes. We want to elicit those mistakes, not by trying to do things incorrectly, but by trying to do things that are challenging. But we want to try those things when mistakes are not going to create a lot of damage, right? So the second type of mistake is the high stakes mistakes, which are the mistakes that would create a lot of damage, right? So if we are driving a school bus, we don't want to make a mistake. If we're in charge of a nuclear plant, or if we're packing a parachute, we want to do what we know works and minimize mistakes. And that's when we're in the performance, in the high stakes mistakes, we want to get into our performance zone and sometimes not worry about learning at all because the stakes are too high. The third type of mistake is the sloppy mistake, which are, when we do things that we already know how to do and we should have known better. And often when we make these mistakes, first of all, often they're not that important, or they might not be important at all. And I think these mistakes can bring kind of joy and humor to our lives. Like if I spill a smoothie all over my shirt and I'm home, I can either choose to get upset or I can laugh about it and I can take a picture of it and send it to my family and friends, which is what I often do. And so I think mistakes can bring joy and humor to our lives, but sometimes sloppy mistakes do cause damage, right? And so we can reflect on how can I avoid this sloppy mistake in the future? And often when we reflect on that, the answer is there are ways to foster more focus or to change our systems and tools in order to avoid this mistake. So I could change where in my desk I put the smoothie so that I don't spill it, for example. And the final kind of mistakes is the aha moment mistake, which is when we do something as we intended, but we then realize it was the wrong thing to do because we have an aha moment. So for example, my wife might be upset about something. I might come and try to console her and problem solve with her. And then I might learn that she didn't want me to problem solve. She just wanted me to empathize and to be there with her. And so I did what I meant to do, but I realized it was the wrong thing to do. And aha moment mistakes are precious. When they happen, we need to just learn from them, reflect on them, and extract their precious gifts. But we can't proactively elicit aha moment mistakes so much, although we can by soliciting more feedback. But the stretch mistakes are really what we can proactively drive by doing things that are challenging and changing the way we do things.
That's fun. And it's so true that the sloppy mistakes can bring joy and humor to our lives. In fact, I don't think this Twitter exists anymore, which is a darn shame. But this theme exists on Reddit in some places that you had one job. And it's just all about just ridiculous mistakes. One of my favorites was a SpongeBob SquarePants episode description, on Netflix or something. But they had this really dark, murder mystery description. And then the caption's oh, I must have missed that SpongeBob episode. And it just tickles me, something special. And yes, that is fun. And we can celebrate that. And particularly, I think that learning zone, performance zone distinction is so handy there in terms of, oh, yes, we're learning now. And boy, that is goofy and hilarious. I remember, you and I were both friends and fans of Maui Asgadam. Shout out, episode number 1. And I remember we were trying to name a company that we had started together, and just by combining words, and I think one of them was just so goofy, Dolphin Secrets. And it's so, I just made these memes out of that, and because it's goofy and that's okay. And I think, you lay it on me. Is it fair to say that when we can laugh and be relaxed and take joy and humor and lightheartedness about mistakes, will that actually help us learn faster and better?
Yeah, because we can observe them better. We can talk about them better. We can also avoid kind of getting triggered and having a fear and away reaction from them. So absolutely. In general, positive emotions help us learn. Sometimes stress can be helpful too, especially if it's not chronic or super high. But positive emotions can help us engage in the learning process. And at the end of the day, again, what is the highest goal? I think for me, a highest goal is happiness, fulfillment, and appreciation. I want to appreciate life. I want to enjoy life. So not only is laughing about mistakes helping me learn, it's also helping me enjoy life, which is even more important.
Okay. Well, anything else when it comes to learning that you want to help distinguish, clarify, myth debunk, things that we should know when we're in the learning zone to get the most out of it?
Well, there are a lot of things we could talk about. One is that sometimes we think about growth mindset or learning zone as something that is about the individual quality. It's about us fostering the beliefs and the habits in our brain and in our bodies to be motivated and effective learners. And there's a lot of truth to that, but we are social beings. And so we need to build cultures and teams and relationships where we can engage in the learning zone together, because at the end of the day, these beliefs about whether people can change are highly influenced by each other, right? By the people who are around me. What messages are they sending? What behaviors? Are they acting like lifelong learners, or are they acting like know-it-alls? That affects my beliefs and it affects my habits. And so we need to kind of talk about these things with our colleagues and think about, is the learning zone something that we're doing well, we're not doing well? Can we get better? What do we want to work on? And do it in collaboration, because at the end of the day, we learn a lot better in collaboration with others than on our own. More brains think better than one brain. We have different experiences, different skills, different tactics, different tools, different perspectives. We can see things from different angles. We can give and receive feedback. So what I would encourage people to think about is, what habits can you work on as you're on your own, but also can you bring others into your process and build relationships that are going to lead to better learning and better performance.
Oh, fantastic. And can you walk us through the growth propeller concept?
Sure. The growth propeller are the 5 elements that each of us can think about continuing to develop in order to become fantastic learners and performers. So picture a propeller with 3 blades, and in the center of the propeller, the axis, there are 2 components, our identity and our purpose. And in terms of our identity, sometimes in terms of a fixed mindset, we might see ourselves as fixed in a particular way, like I'm just a natural parent, for example, and that's part of my identity, and I'm a flawless athlete, or I'm a natural athlete, and that can get in the way of learning. But what we can do, and what's most important around the identity, is to develop the identity of being a learner, being somebody who evolves over our lives and is always continuing to change. So once we can incorporate that into our identity, we're a lot more effective as learners. In terms of purpose, having a reason why we do things, right? Why we care about improvement and performance is really important, because both learning and performing involve effort. And so why are we going to spend that effort? Why do we care? And so developing that purpose as an individual and with our colleagues is something that is necessary in order for us to become great learners and performers. The 3 blades are, one is our beliefs, the other one's our habits, and the other one is our community. So in terms of beliefs, a really important belief that we've talked about is growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Another belief is transparency. We learn and perform a lot better when we make our thinking transparent to others, because then they can give us feedback. They can learn from what we're thinking. And so the fact that transparency is something we want more of, and we want to share more of ourselves, is something we can kind of think about. Also, agency. To what extent do we have influence over our world, rather than are we victims of the world, is something else to think about in terms of beliefs. In terms of habits, sometimes we think about growth mindset as something that is about learning from mistakes. So when we make a mistake, do we learn from them? That's a very reactive or responsive habit. What I would encourage people to think about is, can you develop more proactive habits where changing is the default, right? So what are you doing every day in order to drive your own change and your own evolution? A very simple example that is really powerful for me is every morning I remind myself of what it is that I'm working to improve. And that just primes a growth mindset. I'm looking for opportunities to do that throughout the day, and it's super powerful. And then in terms of community, we need to build trust. We need to build a sense of belonging, and we need to work on collaboration rather than competition in order to both kind of learn and perform. And so that's the Growth Propellers chapter 7, and it talks about those 5 components. And then the part of the community blade is about the relationships we have with others. So part 2 of the book, chapters 8 through 12, is about how we do that in our workplaces, right? How do we build teams and organizations that make learning the easy default?
Okay. Well, Eduardo, tell me, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we hear about some of your favorite things?
Well, I would just mention I really appreciate your podcast, Pete, and just your focus on learning in the workplace makes the world a better place. It's awesome to be in the podcast the second time. So thanks for all you do.
Well, thank you. And could you share now a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Yeah, the quote I have at the bottom of my email is, "The self is not something one finds, it's something one creates," by Thomas Szasz.
Mm-hmm. And could you share a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
Sure. There are many. One is there's a meta-analysis from Harvard that looked at 62 research studies that looked into how much medical doctors improved in their patient outcomes the more years of experience they have in the profession. And what they found is that on average, medical doctors got worse over time. Their patient outcomes became worse because they were so busy in the performance zone, right? Seeing patients, diagnosing, prescribing. And most of them on average don't engage in the learning zone on a regular basis. And so as a result, they forget information that's relevant to infrequent diagnosis, for example, and that decreases their performance. But of course, there's some doctors that do get better over time. But this points to the difference between experience and expertise, right? Experience is something we just get by doing an activity a lot. And expertise is something that we build through the learning zone. And that can happen at any age.
All right. And a favorite book?
Favorite book, Mindset by Carol Dweck, really changed my life. The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama changed my life as well. I'm reading a wonderful book right now. It's called The Clan of the Cave Bear, which is about prehistoric humans. It's super interesting.
All right. And do you have a favorite tool? Something you use to be awesome at your job?
I love Roam Research is a second brain tool, where it's my knowledge management system tool. There's a lot of other second brain tools now. And I also love Otter. To listen to podcasts, I download the MP3 and I upload it to Otter, which transcribes it, and I listen it to there. And what I love about that is that I can highlight kind of gems in the conversation. And after I listen to the episode, I can kind of do something with that, either put it in my knowledge management system or send it to somebody else who would appreciate it, for example.
Oh, Eduardo, that is walking the talk. That is hardcore, and I love it. Thank you. And a favorite habit?
Well, I mentioned one of reminding myself every morning of what I'm working to improve. Before that, the first thing that I do every day is my most treasured habit, and it is just expressing gratitude for the things that I deem most important, which is life, health, love, and peace. Noticing what of those things there are in my life and in the world just puts me in a great emotional state and makes me grateful to be alive and for what is.
And is there a key nugget you share that seems to really connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often, they retweet it, etc.
If we fixate on performance, our performance suffers. That's the performance paradox.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
So my monthly newsletters on my website, which is at briceño.com, my last name.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn. And my book is called The Performance Paradox, Turning the Power of Mindset into Action. Worked really hard the last 3 years to write all the things that we talked about today. So that's another way to learn more about my work.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
My challenge would be can you engage in the learning zone a little bit more with others? Could you start a conversation with your colleagues about whether you want to continue to progress in your learning zone habits together and what you want to work on next, so that you can bring other people into collaboration with you to learn and perform and accelerate that over time together.
All right, Eduardo, this has been a treat. I wish you much good learning and performing.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's been great to speak with you.
I really loved Eduardo's perspective. When it comes to growing, there's a starting point in which continuing to do what you've been doing continues to grow you. But at some point, you reach a point where that is no longer sufficient. And it's not a mystery. It's a commonly observable pattern, which I'm glad Eduardo highlighted and brought to my attention, as well as all of us here. As Eduardo says, in order to improve, we have to change. Great stuff from Eduardo. Again, the show notes, the transcript, and the links to items that we've referenced are over at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP895. Hope to catch you next time. And peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.